Hey guys, Tom Henderson, the founder of RESGEN here, and I want to welcome you to another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast, where we hear stories and have conversations about life in Christ, integrating our faith into every area of our life in ways that we as men can give life to others, at home, at work, and in the community. Joining me for today's episode is Jake Pettengill, a friend of mine who's a follower of Jesus, a husband, a father, and the principal for Sioux Falls Christian Middle School here in Sioux Falls. On today's show, Jake and I visit about a lot of topics, including what it was like as a football coach for 11 years to deal with the parents of the high school football players he coached, and how those experiences shaped the way he both parents and treats coaches today. We also talk about how he and his wife saw God's faithfulness and felt his presence during a difficult journey that no parent wants to take, losing a child just 85 days after her birth. I'm so glad that you're here for this very meaningful episode. Here's my conversation with Jake Pettengill. Jake Pettengill, man, it's good to have you here in the old RESGEN Giving Life Podcast booth.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, dude, this is fun. We're going to, we've had multiple conversations in a variety of settings, including we both serve on the elder board at our church together. So it's going to be fun to be able to have a conversation at this table that I think in the intro, I said that I'm so grateful that people are listening to what I think is going to be a very meaningful conversation. And that's just the word that, as I was thinking about what we were going to be talking about, even just writing that intro, these questions that we're going to talk about, that's the word that just come into my brain.
Yeah.
It's just meaningful because I just feel like the topics in this conversation is going to be very, very helpful to people as well. So before we get into all that, though, let's introduce you to listeners. Okay, so quickly, or take a long time, whatever. You've got the microphone. So just take a minute and introduce yourself, a little bit about yourself, family, job, and then we'll kind of get into a little bit more of your story and we'll get into it.
Cool. Well, I grew up in California, so I was kind of a California boy, and I like to pull that card every once in a while. But when I was 18, I moved out to South Dakota, went to Dakota State University, met my wife, Lisa, who we've been married just 16 years now.
Okay.
We have 3 kids, and then we have a 4th who's in heaven.
Yeah.
We have a foster child. I work at Sioux Falls Christian. I'm working the middle school there. I'm the middle school principal. And my wife works there as well. So it's kind of a family affair at Sioux Falls Christian.
Kids go to school there.
Yeah.
She's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where my kids are in my office after school. They're in her office. And we just kind of, have a good time doing that.
Yeah.
And so, that's kind of where we're at now. I'm an ex-football coach and now kind of living the administration life.
Okay. So I did not realize, I knew you were from California, but I did not realize that you moved from California to go to school at Dakota State. Like you chose Dakota State from California. What is that all about?
Well, so here's the deal. Like my dad was my high school football coach, and I really wanted to play college football. And I was an NAIA football player. I wasn't athletic enough. I wasn't strong enough, but I could play at the next level.
Okay.
And so California at that time had one NAIA football school, and that was Azusa Pacific University.
Yeah.
And I couldn't afford that. I valued Christian education, but I couldn't afford it. And so we looked out in the Midwest, and one of his football players came out and played at the University of Mary, which was the DAC in the DAC 12 at the time.
Yeah.
And so we looked at Dakota State, we looked at USF, and for some reason God said, let's go to Dakota State. And what was crazy is my wife was thinking, so she's a year older than me.
Okay.
And she was thinking at that time, I might transfer to USF. And I was looking at both of them, and it was just like, God shut that door for her. God shut the USF door for me. And we both decided to stay at Dakota State. And that's,
okay.
crazy.
Well, that was good for you as a USF alum. I'm like, man, we could have had quality students like you at USF. You would have been a little bit after me, but, and now with both my boys there, it could have just been that legacy. I think that probably would have been, so what years were that? Was that when you came to Dakota State?
Yeah. So I came out in 2003 and was there till 2008. I was on the 5-year college plan.
Okay. Okay, got it. And so tell me about your faith journey. So when did you really say, man, faith and a personal relationship with Jesus is something that I want to make a focal point of my life?
Definitely. I can't say that I have anything incredible up until my adulthood, but grew up in a Christian household. My mother and father went to church every Sunday. that was a priority. We wouldn't skip church. And my mom talked to me about 4 or 5 years old and just said, "Hey, is this something you want to do?" She knew that it was important to me, and so I committed my life there, and really had a pretty good life growing up as a young kid, and had a couple hiccups along the way where I had an injury and had a tailbone that was broke, and had a guy pray for me and felt the healing of God in that moment. So that really was like a significant time in my life. And then as an adult, I shared with you a little bit earlier, but dealt with the loss of a child and just saw God in a variety of ways there. And so the Lord has always been important to me and my family. But I've just seen like baby steps where I grow here or I grow there. And now I feel like I'm in a pretty good spot.
Yeah, that's good. Well, yeah, and we're going to, probably in the second half of our time together, we're going to talk about just the journey that you and your wife went on, your family went on in the loss of your daughter, and then the journey that you're on now with fostering and potential adoption in the near future here. So, but before we get into that, you mentioned your dad was a football coach, and then you came to Dakota State to play collegiate football. Did you have the desire to be a football coach then, at that moment or at that time, partially because your dad was a football coach? Because I want to talk about that whole youth sports thing, because as you know, youth sports is a pretty big deal just in America, especially, and in the Midwest, it's no different. In some ways, it's become an idol for many families and many people. But what got you into coaching? Was just seeing your dad do it and wanting to do that too?
Yeah, that's all I ever knew. He was a football coach when I was 2, 3, 4, 5. He was my high school football coach. I always ran around the sidelines. And so, I went into college and I didn't know what field I was going to go into, but I did know, I hadn't made up my mind that I was going to be a teacher and a coach. But once I got there, I'm like, okay, I got to make that decision. I love sports. I'm competitive. And so, it just kind of was, that's what I'm supposed to do. That's all I've seen. And so got into that and, didn't really know that if I was going to be a head coach or not. Did the assistant thing for a number of years. And then a head job opened up, and I'm like, okay, maybe like God's opened this door for me. And at Sioux Falls Christian, and I had never been involved in Christian education. And so I'm like, hey, I'm going to take this job. And really at that time, it wasn't probably because it was a Christian school. It was because it was a head job. Yeah. But then you kind of learn like, oh, God's maybe doing something a little bit different here. God wants me to be at Sioux Falls Christian for bigger reasons. But yeah, you kind of bring up that youth sports. It's an interesting topic right now, and it's a challenge that I have for myself as a parent, even just seeing my kids who are, 11 years old, 14 years old, 8 years old. How much am I idolizing that, and what do my conversations need to look like with my kids? Because I've dealt with it as a coach and having, parents running up and down the sideline upset with you, or really focusing a lot on some of the things that don't really matter. Am I doing that same thing? And you just see this journey that you walk along as a parent that you say, okay, I'm never ever going to walk along. I'm never going to be like when I'm coaching. And then it's like, oh, gotta get caught in that trap a little bit.
So let's go, put on your head coach's hat again for a second. And what was it like, being a coach of high school football players, and dealing with parents? Because there's some parents that are probably definitely hands off. And they're much more just, hey, we're just glad that Johnny's out there trying hard, trying new sports. Hope he doesn't get hurt. But, we're just thankful he's out there. Then there's other parents that are probably a little bit more intense, that are maybe living a little, I don't know, are they living vicariously through their kid and wishing they could be back on the football field again? So what was it like, the dynamic of working with parents?
Definitely. I think I was pretty blessed to have parents who supported me for the most part, or at least to my face. And so, but you come in, just from my experience, I took over a 1-7 program, and we didn't win very much. We went 1-7, 2-6, and so you're winning 3 games in 2 years. People want to find something to be frustrated with you about. And the reason I wanted to coach football was because I wanted to develop relationships. I wanted to grow young men to be followers of Christ. And so that was my passion. I kind of have this type A personality where I am focused, and when I want to accomplish something, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get that accomplished. And so We spent time together in the weight room in the off season, and it was all about like, how do we build this camaraderie amongst our athletes, our teammates? Like, I want kids to see me as a father figure. And then you have maybe sometimes parents who don't recognize that this is what you're trying to do. You're just the coach who's calling the plays and deciding to put in whoever you want to put in based on whatever you feel like. And my passion for our students and our athletes was much deeper than that. And so when I'd have, a parent come after me sometimes and say, hey, why is my kid not playing? It's like, you don't know the time that's been invested in your child. You don't know why I'm doing what I'm doing. And so it really sometimes kind of, you saw the bad side out of parents because they didn't always see the big picture.
So how did you like navigate those waters then, to where every parent wants their kid to play more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Every parent wants their kid every parent usually sees their kid maybe as a little bit better than they are. Right. And
don't we all?
And that doesn't mean, don't look like behind that. There's not much more underneath that statement. But so how did you navigate that as a coach to be like, okay, yes, I hear you and I believe in your kid, but yet that can't necessarily yield into more playing time because that doesn't give us our best chance to win. We love the Rudy stories, but yet we also have a job to do. And so how'd you do that?
Well, I would say like over the years, humility hasn't always been a strong suit of mine. Like I sometimes, if there was an issue, I'd butt heads with that issue and really I would let pride get the best of me. And so there were times in conversations where if a parent wanted to approach me, I'm going to battle you right back, which I regret and I'm embarrassed about. But once I took a step back and I even matured as a coach in a few years, you recognize that like I have my best interest is for your child. Your best interest is for your child. We want the best for your child. And how do I communicate that to a parent? Because if the parent knows that I love their kid, it's going to go a longer way. And so I really had to just know who my athletes were so the parent could see that. And so there were times where we had to have really hard conversations. There were times where, again, I would confront a parent or a parent would confront me and it got ugly. There was also times where I felt like they started to know who I really was and what I was about and that I had a deeper purpose than just winning football games for our school.
So in those situations then, is that where you had to say, okay, you talked about how humility wasn't necessarily a strong, suit for you at the infancy of your coaching. So is that just something that you said, okay, I'm going to try to purposefully just listen more and try to put myself in a parent's shoes? Or were there certain things that helped you have a more humble attitude as a coach?
Yeah. So I think the Lord, I came in as a 27-year-old head coach. And again, how can I win football games? This is about me. This is my identity. This is who I am. I am a football coach. I am the face of the school. Like that. That's how I saw it. I don't see it that way anymore, but that's how I saw it at that time. And so again, dealt with a lot of tough losses and to the point where I'm like, okay, do I even know how to win football games as a coach? And on the tail end, we had a lot of success. And I learned through our success that, so just not to throw this out there, but we were able to win, a couple state championships. After winning those state championships, the next day, I'm like, is this really what it's all about? Like, it's really not that big of a deal. I didn't feel fulfilled inside like I thought I would. And so
it's how you're going to repeat next year.
That's the questions. I know the expectations that much higher.
We did when someone wins a Super Bowl in the NFL, right? It's like, hey, what's your chances of getting the team back together and repeating? And then the coach always says, we're just going to celebrate and then we'll get to work tomorrow. So it's just like that, even in the high school. And
that's kind of what I was like, okay, if I'm not just doing this to win state championships, why am I doing this? What's the bigger purpose here? It just causes you to really reflect on who are you and why are you doing what you're truly doing. And so that really kind of caused me to take a back seat and change the way I approached the game, change the way I approached conversations. And maybe I can say that because it's easier when you're winning. It's sometimes more challenging when you feel like you're not winning as many games. But it just allowed me to reflect on why I was doing what I was doing.
So how did that translate? So so you said that kind of caused you to look at the game differently, even coaching. So how did that specifically change maybe the way that you actually coached teenage boys whose whole world is sports in many ways, who idolize sports stars, who just loves doing, thinking up touchdown TikTok dances, and whatever, to say like, look, it's pursue greatness on the field. Yeah. Let's win games. Let's become a great, as good of a defender or an offensive player as we can. But yet at the same time, like, this is just one season of your life. And you and I now, okay, I'm older than you, but I mean, we look back and the teenage years are just a small percentage of our life now. Right. And it gets even smaller for me the older I get. But for kids, it's it's like 25% of their life.
Yes.
And so to try to help them get this perspective of enjoy it, but there's more than just winning. A game, a championship. So how did that translate into your coaching and really like helping teen boys?
Yeah. So again, kind of going early on, I just did what I did because I only knew what my previous coaches had done. And really, like, if we were going to do these headbutting Oklahoma drills, we were going to do it because my coaches had done that for me. And it's like, that's not the way football's trending right now. Exactly. And so we're setting up for Concussion Central. But as we got older, we created more of a mission statement for our team. And I wanted that mission statement not to be something that we talked about just when we were on the football field, but what we talked about in life. And so we talked about embracing the challenge, growing together in love as brothers, and then giving all the glory to God. And we focused on that in all aspects, even to the point where I would overemphasize, and my kids are like, oh, here's Coach Pettengill talking about this mission statement again. Like, I wanted them to know it was that important to me. And so when we talk about embracing challenges, that might be a drill we're doing on the field when you feel tired. It also might be a challenge where you're doing a homework assignment. You have a girlfriend that breaks up with you. Whatever that, your parents are dealing with a divorce right now, and you're having to go through that. Like, what does that look like to embrace challenges? Growing together in love as brothers. Like we talk about, like I see the way you're developing leaders at RESGEN. Like we try to develop leaders, whether they were a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I think oftentimes in programs you say, okay, let's develop the seniors. You're too late when you start developing seniors. I wanted to start early with kids. And so we wanted to grow together and have that leadership start early and happen often. And then recognizing, having kind of like this biblical worldview that everything comes from God, and not just our success, but the people that are cheering for us in the stands on a Friday night, the world that we're living in that doesn't apply to football. And really just making it bigger than what football is. Because I remember when I graduated high school in my last football game, I was like, there's going to be nothing in my life that's better than this. And I'm thinking like, I'm done. Like, I'm done. And now I look back and I just chuckle. I'm like, I never would want to play a football game ever again. But it's perspective. And how do you communicate that perspective? And how do you live that perspective? And how do you communicate it passionately?
And then also meet them at that point where they see that you also understand the season of life that they are in, where this really is. I've worked with teenagers. Now, of course, you've seen the maturation of RESGEN over the years, but now it's working with men and marriages and all those kinds of things. But I mean, my first years of ministry, it was almost 20 years of full-time working with teenagers. And the most important, I think, meaningful conversations I had with them was when like they say, okay, you get me, you get it though, that like, okay, yes, I know you have this other perspective and that there's more to life than this. And I remember having conversation with my boys, who are now 18 and 22 in college. But I'm like, I remember having conversation with them and being like, guys, there's just so much more to life. I mean, the minute you graduate, you're going to just be like looking ahead in college and be like, man, why was I so worried? And I don't remember if it was usually Isaiah. He was the one that I had more of those conversations with. But I remember he said, yeah, but Dad, this is where I am right now. And being like, oh, yeah, it's important that I meet you there. and create that identification. So then, they will later in life go, oh yeah, that's what my dad, or that's what Coach Pettengill meant. But anyway.
Well, I think that's where grace comes in, because it's easy to focus on the points where every single time somebody makes a mistake, okay, you did this wrong, you did that. I mean, kids have to know that you love them. Kids have to know that you care about them. Kids have to know that you are always there for them, whether they did something really good, whether they did something really bad. And that was kind of my hope. But sometimes you get caught in that trap as a coach, because you worry about, what are your players doing on a Friday night? Are they going to be suspended for next week? Like you worry about those types of things. And so it's easy to talk down in situations. But I think the coaches that are the most successful are the coaches that are relatable. I look at, Coach OJ at Augie, and just the things that he does and the way his players love and admire him. There's a really special bond there.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I think that you're right. I mean, both, Coach OJ was on, he was on the pod. I had Bob Young, before his passing on the podcast. And I think undoubtedly, players that know their coaches love them at whatever level, right? I mean, you see in the NFL too. Like when you see, I think that one of the reasons that Kansas City's had so much success over the years, right, is because Andy Reid just gets in there and he's a goofball with them. He makes funny State Farm commercials, but I mean, he's hard. I mean, he coaches, but yet the players love him. I think that's what's so exciting about this year for the Vikings. It's finally our season. I have a feeling of it, Jake. But
we'll see.
We'll see. But I think they have a coach right now that is just. It's just he encourages and loves the players, and so for those in the coaching world that may be listening, when kids understand that, they will. I mean, they'll get out there and they'll play hard and not get too worried about it. So then let me ask you this: now being on the other side, because now you're a parent, you've had the experience of dealing with parents, of trying to coach athletes, and now you're a parent of kids that are in athletics. You and I saw each other running across many cross-country courses over the course of the last couple of years, with your daughter running and my son running. And that was something that I know that, Chase was able to achieve some, level of success in cross-country and is going to go run in college, and we're very excited. But trying to help even your own kids understand that athletics are fun and important, but they're still not to be an idol. How has it being a parent of a teen, and what does that look like for you? Because I think that's something that all of us as parents kind of struggle with at times.
Yeah, I'm learning, and that's the thing. I reflect on conversations that I've had with my daughter today. And I say that because my two boys are a little bit younger, and we're just doing the really young youth sports scene. And I have a daughter who's in 8th grade who's running cross country, and
she's very good.
Well, thank you. She's been blessed. But all that being said, are we making that an idol? Are we making that an identity? What do my conversations look like with her in those regards? And what I've always wanted to talk about with my kids, I always wanted to focus on not how many goals you scored, not how many baskets you made, but what does your effort look like? And then the next question I would always ask, or something that's similar, would be, how did you glorify God in that moment? And I want my kids to know that those are the two most important things that I see with sports. Like, are we doing all that we can to glorify God? And then are we uplifting others? Are we making other people know that we're Christians by our love? And so those are the questions I go back to, but then sometimes I question myself, is that the action that I'm showing? What does it look like when my daughter's running across country meet and I'm running across the course yelling at her, go, 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 go. Or, I get upset with my son in a basketball game because he's double dribbling or whatever. So like, what am I actually showing? And what am I
pass
saying?
Or whatever. Yeah.
Yes. But I think that time in the car on the ride home is like a huge reflection time with your kids. And I'm a hard dad at times. I'm very real. I can be very critical, but I also want my kids to know that I'm proud of them in the things that they do. But I think we're in this generation where we think that sports, and I'm trapped in this as well, so I'm not putting this on anybody else, but we think that sports is like who we're going to be for the next 20 years. And really, I look at having an 8th grade daughter who in 5 years, she may be done running for the rest of her life. And what are we focusing on, and what are we investing in that? because there's a lot of crucial years and experiences that you could miss out on if you choose to focus too much, in the wrong place. So I see that happening in that sports world. And I always said, oh, this isn't going to be me. And you start to see yourself slip there a little bit from time to time. But high school sports are fun. There's a lot you can learn from it.
Yeah.
But it's also not the be all end all.
Yeah, discipline, teamwork. I mean, there's so many things that come from youth sports. But the one things that I had teens in my youth group back when I was a youth pastor, and students that I would speak to on a regular basis. And we've all heard stories of this. They're pushed so much throughout their middle school and high school career that they get burned out. I mean, these are kids that have talent, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes that's a parent's fault.
Yes.
Sometimes that's a parent's fault. And it's tough not to coach. I mean, I imagine that as a former head coach, it's hard not to put the coach's hat on when you're talking to your kids. I was never a coach. I coached my kids in soccer and baseball when they were younger, right? But that was more about getting them to know each other's names, running a few drills, and having fun. But yet still, I mean, I remember when Chase and I this year, when I would have questions for him, hey, did you get your running in today? Did you run it? Well, what was your per mile average that you're running or whatever? And not because I was trying to be domineering or coach him, but I was just trying to keep him on track.
Yes.
Pun intended. Yeah. But, dad joke. But but at the same time, but he said, Dad, it's my running career. And I think one of the things that my boys have taught me is that if I just listen, and they usually will give me, they're really just tweetable moments. Like they could just tweet the statement that they made because they're never really long. They're usually less than like 160, 240 characters, but there's just these little statements that they make that I'm like, these moments, right? So how have you had to discipline yourself as a parent even to just allow it to be their thing? And I know they're still young, but I mean, already you're building that foundation and giving them the freedom to say, I don't know if I enjoy this as much as maybe I used to, or maybe you want me to.
I'm still learning there. And I think I have to recognize where each of my children are at, like in their athletic career. And again, I don't like to say athletic career because we're talking about a third grader right now. Come on, but where are they at?
Illustrious. It is an illustrious career.
It's gonna be the next NFL football, but no. But what can they take? What conversations are they seeking? Who has God created them to be from a personality standpoint? And I reflect on that because there's been times where I've had my kids really put me in my place. And it's like, okay, is this more important to me or is this more important to them? And you feel kind of dumb in the moment. So I'm continuously learning, and I have a daughter who, you kind of say some of those same things like, okay, what was your mile pace? Like, how many miles did you go? And I need to be careful there because I'm going to cause her to not like what she's doing because that's all my focus is. That's all I want to talk about with you. And so
that's a good word right there, Jake. I think because if it's the only thing we talk about with them, that's really all they are to us, right? Is well, you're a runner. No, you're my daughter.
Yes. And so that's where I need to reframe, retrain. When I walk in the house, what does our conversation start with? What does it end with? And maybe some of that stuff comes up because those are common interests of ours. I like running. She likes running. But that can't be the focus. She can't be like, okay, when's Dad going to get to this point in this conversation? And the other thing is, I think about like how, and I mentioned this, but how are we treating the other people that we are competing with, that are officiating our events? I have vowed, and I hope that I stay this way, to treat officials with the utmost respect, because nothing disappoints me more when you go to a game and you see parents that are complaining, that are telling the official how terrible they are, standing up, pointing at them. It's like really, like, what are we doing? Like, what kind of world are we leading? And it's easy to be a Christian when you're in church or when you're in a certain setting and then walk out and say, hey, like this official's terrible, and so there's been times even with my kids when I've seen them give a certain facial reaction, or they've hit their fist together, or done something like that. It's like, whoa, like we need to rethink this. And so the other thing I really encourage my children to do is every time they get done with this sporting event, they thank their coach, they thank the official, no matter what. because I just want that to be their trained thought, and we blame officials way too much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's really good. Okay, so I want to kind of transition now, just because to just the whole idea of you've been afforded an opportunity because of working at a Christian school that you've been able to bring God into so it's not fully a transition yet, but into just faith conversations, even into your coaching and even into the classroom, and now as an administrator and all of that, which is wonderful, and a great opportunity that you have that maybe other teachers or other coaches are maybe restricted with, right? I know that's probably one of the reasons why you're so passionate about Christian education. And you said that you had never been involved in Christian education prior to coming to Sioux Falls Christian as head football coach, and then now being a part of the administration and leadership there. So tell me why you're so passionate about private Christian education for elementary and middle school, high school kids.
Definitely. Well, I want to make sure to clarify a few things. So I love public school teachers. I love public school. I support public schools as well. I grew up in public school, had teachers who were Christians, teachers who I still stay in touch with today. I think there's a lot of great things that are happening in public school. So don't hear what I'm not saying in this conversation. But it was, 11, 12 years ago where I was exposed to the Christian school. And it was something that I was nervous about. I'm like, well, I've never, I grew up in a Christian household. I'm a regular church attender. Like, I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Like, that's been important to me from the beginning. However, it's a little bit intimidating. Like, you're in this Christian world. You lead kids on a daily basis in their walk with the Lord. And so, I walked into that setting and wasn't necessarily sure how to lead. And as I've progressed over the last 11 years, you start to see even the Christian education system continue to grow. And so the big thing that, we've probably said we always have talked about, but there's really a push for is like developing a biblical worldview and the conversations that you can have on a consistent basis. And, my life verse is 1 Corinthians 10:31, whether you eat, whether you drink, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. And so what I really want to focus on with that language there is how are we know in the big moments that we can bring it back to God. But what about the little tasks? What about when we're eating a meal? What about when we're walking to class? Like, how are we bringing God, glory to God in all situations? And I think that's kind of the direction that I see Christian education really focusing on is, what does a biblical worldview look like all the way around in all moments at all times, whether you're in science class, whether you're in math class, whether you're in history class, because this is God's world. Yeah. And so we've got to continuously make it about him, not just when we feel like it, just when we think that we need to, but really just like ingrain that into our head.
Yeah. So, because it is very simple for us to live, segmented lives and that kind of thing. And so to be able to say like, and that's one of the hopes of even just, this podcast is, and that we talk about all the time is, how our faith is to permeate, is to be incorporated into every aspect of our life, our leadership, our work, our homes, all of that kind of thing, where it's not just something that is a label, but it's a lifestyle, right? Yes. And so, that's some of the kinds of things that you're speaking about, with your role at Sioux Falls Christian. And I think we have seen, a larger influx of families into private Christian education, especially over the last several years. And so it'll be interesting to see as more and more families are saying like, no, we want to make this a priority. Yeah. And obviously there's a financial, piece of that puzzle that keeps some families from being able to participate in that, should they want to. But I know that even there's different scholarship opportunities. There's different ways to try to make funding work for parents that maybe want that for their kids as well. So let me ask you this, Jake, because I mean, you've seen the numbers. You've been a part of the church long enough. You've worked with teenagers long enough. I mean, that one of the difficulties the church, big C, has struggled with, one of the challenges they have is is the kids leaving high school and leaving the church, maybe coming back once they get married and start having kids, right? Mm-hmm. Because they had that foundation instilled with them, or they're like, geez, I got kids, I probably need some faith, or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on, because I think it's sometimes simple to say, okay, well, you know what? I've gone to a Christian school, gone to church every Sunday. I've gone to a Christian school, every day of my life. Yeah. And so, I don't really need to keep going to church, or, it's Jesus has been shoved down my throat, and I mean, there's youth group kids that say that. So this is not a private education,
no,
conversation,
totally.
But I just am wondering, like, your thoughts, because these are conversations that I've been having for years with people about how do we just keep college students and that 18 to 25-year-old young adults in the church.
Yeah, good question. That's a question I think we're pondering as well. Like, and I'm even going to take that back a little bit. Like, I just look at like sin and just being in meetings with teachers, or even just my perspective in different conversations. And we look and we see kids who are making mistakes, and we're like, but we're at a Christian school, and kids shouldn't be thinking this way. And we live in a world full of sin.
Yeah, they're kids.
But when you say, okay, we have God all around us, and we're talking about God in all situations, whatever. And so we focus on that, but it's easy to forget, like, our kids are going to mess up time and time and time again. And I think my hope is, are we planting seeds? Are we consistently making our world, our subject, our conversations, are we making that, again, coming back to that biblical worldview, are we making that about God? Mm-hmm. And is that the focus of our conversation? Because kids are going to shy away. Kids are going to turn from the Lord. But it's been so cool in situations where I've seen kids who have graduated as seniors, and it's like, okay, what track is this kid going to go down?
Yeah. And
then 5 years later, I get a text from a kid, and they're like, yeah, I'm leading a Bible study. Mm-hmm. I'm marrying a godly woman. Just things like that. So do we have the answer to change that? No, but I just think consistently putting the Lord in front of them is going to consistently, plant that seed, and hopefully they walk the path that we hope for them.
Well, and the consistency, I think, is, there's a couple of things that you said in there that I think are important. Consistency, just showing consistency in our words and our deeds, right? Like, so like that whole, walk matching the talk thing. We're not saying one thing and then, doing another, like yelling at refs and all that kind of stuff. Same thing can go from, it's easy to Christian something up or Jesus something up and it be received in a trite way, because it's just something that just so flows easily from the tongue. But if we are people that are trying to influence teenagers, if we are people that are really even trying to influence our relational world, is there meaning behind what we're saying?
Yeah.
Right? Are the words, I mean, truly coming from like a heart that overflows with that love for the Lord, with that desire to be obedient and to see other people understand what a relationship with Christ is all about in mountaintops and in the valleys. And so that being said, this is where I want to talk a little bit about your daughter.
Okay.
Because I don't know of a darker valley that a family can go through than through the death of a child.
Yeah.
And being a part of church together, and praying alongside your family, and just watching that journey. Neither of us were on the elder board at that time. I mean, we were just in the beginning stages of kind of coming into that season, but watching you and your family just walk through that season, and seeing that the words that you shared about Christ, you could see that they were definitely from a place of meaning, a place of true devotion.
Yeah.
You modeled that very well.
Thank you.
Through very difficult days. So take us into just a little bit of that story of Savea.
Okay.
And when you found out about, her, it was a very rare
Yeah.
disease, right?
Yep.
So like, did you find out about that in the pregnancy? Did you find out like after she was born? And then just tell us a little bit about that journey and just, whatever.
And you cut me off if I talk too long.
Well, no, that's great. I want to give you the freedom to do it, and maybe I'll just try to, nutshell some stuff or whatever.
Yep.
But let's just start with like, when did you found out, and just kind of where your thoughts were and heart was at that time.
Definitely. Yeah. No. So I'm a prankster. I like to mess with my wife. So I
kind of got into the story a little different than I thought. It was April Fool's Day.
Well, it was April Fool's Day.
So
April Fool's Day. So April 1st, I send a text to my father-in-law, who always tries to get me going. So we just kind of play around and joke around. And so April Fool's, I sent a picture. My wife's like 35, 36 years old at the time. So would be an older mom at that point. And so I sent a picture of an ultrasound and just said, hey, look, and nobody believed us. But basically we're saying, hey, we're pregnant. We weren't pregnant. But then you look at a month to that day later, we found out we were pregnant.
Okay.
Not expecting, not planning, didn't want to be pregnant, had 3 kids at that time. And so we were happy with our journey where we were at. And so you go from April 1st to May 1st, and then we get into end of June, and then July 1st kind of turns into being a significant day as well. But end of June, I wanted to know the gender. And so are we gonna have a boy? Are we gonna have a little girl? Like, my kids are excited. They're taking their tallies on what they want. And so I told my wife, you do the genetic testing for older moms just to make sure everything's all right. And so I said, hey, let's send this off. Let's get it back. And they said it takes about a week to get the information back. Well, we're like 13 days into the process, don't get anything back. And so I'm kind of like, you need to make a phone call. Like, we got to figure this out. I want to know what we're having. And so she calls and they said, oh, well, we lost the information. I'm like, how do you lose the information? Whatever. And so we have to go back, and she does it again. Well, we get a call on July 1st, and my wife actually takes the call, and I'm at work in my office, and they say, we just want to share with you that there's a 65% chance that your daughter has this rare disorder called trisomy 13. And so she finds that out, and she calls me. And I remember just sitting in my office, and my heart just drops. I'm like, what does this mean? But then I'm like, what's the 35% mean? Like 65, 35, Yeah. So I call, because I'm more of the question asker. My wife is more of like, she takes it in and tries to process it. Like, I'm like, I need to know exactly how this works out. And so I called, and they said, if it's not trisomy 13, it's a significant genetic disorder. So don't be hoping that it's the other 35%, because it's still going to be something significant. So like, I was just at a loss for words. And so that was July 1st.
So they'll take me into the conversation then that you then had with your wife. And I mean, I'm assuming there was speechless moments, tear-filled moments, like, what in the world is going on moments. What were those?
Yeah, it was a weird conversation, because I was in my office at school and she was at home, and I don't know how she actually processed it in that moment. I know she was crying. I know we were just like, what? Like, God, what's your plan here? What are you intending to happen here? And so that was just, I mean, so the next day we were leaving for California for a 2-week vacation. And so we hadn't told my family that we were pregnant, and we were going to surprise them with this belly bump. And then we had to tell them in the moment. And so that was kind of hard. So then we kind of go through this process, knowing that she's going to be born on December 11th. We're going to do a C-section. And she sounds like a pretty normal baby, but you could see a cleft lip. You could see 6 digits on both hands. There's just a lot of different abnormalities. And they said she would probably not live to her birth. So she'd probably die in the womb at some point. So we get to the day of the birth. And
hey, can I stop you real quick? Just like, what about your other kids? Like, what did you choose to tell them, and when?
Yeah. So we're a pretty open and honest family. We wrote a letter initially to them and said, from the baby, before we knew what the baby had, and just said, hey, I'm excited to be your little sibling. My wife really wanted a girl, and she was a girl, and then we just came home and we talked to them about it, and we said we don't really know what this is going to be about. We don't know what's going to happen. We wanted it was raw, and I wish I would have made that moment probably more about like, God has a bigger purpose for this, and what's this going to look like? But I was probably pretty emotional in that moment, and trying to just walk alongside them and just kind of having those raw emotions. But then we walked away from the next couple conversations saying, how can we use this situation to glorify God? And my initial conversation with my family was like, I have a few friends in this world, and I'm gonna that are non-believers. We talk about having our oikos at church, and I'm gonna try to shine for my oikos. I want them to know that I love Jesus. Jesus is the center of our life, and because we are dealing with hard, it's still gonna be okay. And so that was our plan. Our plan.
Yeah.
And so she's born on December 11th. She's doing okay. And we're like, what's going on here? She's gonna be on a G tube. She's gonna be, not breathing well, but she's generally doing okay because all of the doctors I talked to said she's not gonna live.
Right.
And so we go into the NICU. She lives for 5 days at that point. And we're starting to talk about like, how are we gonna get out of this hospital? And she ends up staying 3 weeks in the hospital. And finally, one of my friends who's a doctor and deals with babies, she says, Jake, you can't live this way. You got to get her out of here. And so we just kind of walked through that a little bit, and we took her home. And it was one of those things, you're talking right before COVID, and so people are like worried about germs and whatnot, and so you're like, okay, every time I go outside, I got to wash my hands, and you just don't want to get her more sick than she already is. But she ends up living 85 days, and about 83 days into it, they tried to put an IV in her arm, couldn't get in her arm, couldn't get in her neck. It took them about 2 hours, and so they said, hey, we need to have a meeting. They pulled 10 doctors in that room, and Lisa and I are sitting in there, and we're just asking the kidney doctor, asking the baby doctor, asking all the doctors, like, what do you think we should do next? And everybody is saying, well, I don't know what else we can do. Like, it's time to maybe let her go. And I have a good friend who used to teach at Sioux Falls Christian, a guy by the name of Ryan Chase, who's dealt with some different challenges in his life. And Ryan told me, because our commitment to Savea was, if it burdens us, we're going to continue to be burdened. If it burdens Savea, then we got to maybe take other things into consideration. And it was burdening her. And so we were in this room with 10 or 12 doctors, and we get around the table, and they all kind of tell the same thing. And I said, you know what? Our goal with Savea's life was to bring glory to God, and just kind of talk them through that. And I had doctors in tears, not I, but we had doctors through this situation, and you could just feel the Holy Spirit working in that moment. And it was one of those things where I said, okay, I hope to impact my oikos, or I hope God works through me to impact our oikos. And it was so much bigger than that. And that's where, like, you see these doctors at the funeral, you have relationships with some of these doctors today. And it was just a significant, just experience. And I make it sound good. It wasn't good. It was horrible. It was terrible.
Yeah, right.
But the other challenge that came up was, before she was born, I was going to mention this, and this was a really hard, as a Christian man, it's a really hard thing to admit. But one of the doctors asked us, they said, hey, would you like to terminate Savea before she was Savea? And so to me, I'm like, okay, well, they didn't say abortion, they said terminate. This is legal by the state of South Dakota. And you start to like have the devil creep in, and you could just see him change the words of abortion to terminate, where maybe this is okay to do, and you start to like ponder those things, and not really, but you just start to think about that a little bit, and very quickly we like, oh no, this is whatever God has in store for Savea. Savea's going to get to experience, and we want to walk alongside
Yeah.
her with that.
So powerful. And, Jake, the statement that you made about, if it's a burden to us, we'll continue to walk through that together. And as husband and wife, and with the Lord leading us, and wisdom of doctors and all that kind of thing. But when it becomes a burden to her, and it's something that is just going to be way too much on her, then we need to have, different conversations. And so even just that mindset, I think is just such a, and I just think there's so many, you think about just that was a very powerful statement for me when you said that. And, I just think about, when you look at God the Father, right. And he just says, we're going to, I don't want my kids to face the burden of sin and life apart from me. Right. So I'm going to do everything I can, in taking this burden upon myself of letting my son go. Right. I mean, it's a completely different situation, but I'm just saying, like, great. I just feel this, like, just I felt like the love, like, I mean, that's a loving statement that you and Lisa made. And I just think about the loving statement that God the Father, makes for us, each and every day as he gave all, for us. And so, you 85 days, you lay her to rest, you have a celebration of a short life, but a life that reached many. In 85 days, she reached many people. And this was, I didn't even really know you guys. I just had obviously just heard about the situation, saw it on socials. I knew you were, that you attended Central and all this kind of thing, and just watching the impact and I wasn't blowing smoke. I mean, the way that you modeled the grace of, and you really practiced the presence of God. And that's what you saw. You saw his presence. You saw his faithfulness in unexpected ways. And I don't know that you can pray for more, right?
Well, that's Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and a lot of like God is doing great things in this town, and God has put great people around us. And if this was Lisa and I, obviously with God, we can do anything, but God put a community around us to embrace this tough situation with us. I remember coming home from the hospital one night just broken. And then there's Sioux Falls Christian choir students. It was around Christmas time that they were singing Christmas carols to us, like right at our front door. And I just started bawling in front of all of our students. I remember walking up to my room one night, I think it was like December 23rd, just sad. And knowing that Svea's in there, but Svea's breathing hard and heavy. And on the chair, from somebody we didn't know, there was an $800 card in there. You just saw time after time again, like God was faithful through his people in our city. And that was what really like kept us going. And I want to give credit to my wife even. I remember I'm not usually the emotional guy from a crying standpoint. I'm emotional in other ways, but and we get so close to December 11th, and we women respond to situations different than men respond to situations, and I remember and my wife's emotional, and I remember it's about December 8th, December 7th, and my wife's like, I'm okay right now. Like, we know this baby's probably gonna die in 3 or 4 days, even though Sabea did it, and she just has this peace that passes all understanding, and her relationship with the Lord is strong, but was so strong at that point. And she was turning to him. Like, I have never seen the Holy Spirit move like that in somebody. And I'm the one that's struggling. I'm the one a month before that leaves the hospital, mad that she didn't go to the hospital with me for this appointment on Sabea, just crying in my car. And I just, her faithfulness was an admiration to me. I admired that. And so it was really, really cool. But no, the people in Sioux Falls really walked alongside us with this.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's such a good testimony for our community. Obviously the school, local church, And it's so true. This is, we're created for relationship with God. No question about it. But we're also created for relationship with others.
Yes.
And we need other people. And especially, and we see the love of Christ through people.
Yes.
And especially in those moments when you necessarily didn't ask for it, but God knew that you needed it, which is pretty cool. So, okay, so now fast forward really quick. We've only got a few more minutes here, but I feel like this is something that I want to end our time with, because, so, I mean, you lay your daughter to rest, and then the Lord puts fostering on your heart. And I remember this was when you and I actually started being on the elder board together, when you were going through this fostering journey. I just remember like sitting there and listening and being, and I remember, I don't know, I'm pretty sure I asked the question. If I didn't, I was thinking it and somebody else did, but I asked the question of like, aren't you fearful of falling in love with like a little foster baby that you may adopt? And the same thing, and how are you protecting your kids and your heart through this process? Because it would be really easy to attach yourself to, another little baby that really has not fully attached to you because they're a little baby.
Yes.
But I mean, yeah, God laid this on your heart, and that's continued to progress.
Yes.
So, can you speak to that?
Yeah. So Lisa said, when we jumped into this, and I say we jumped into it, she jumped into this, and I kind of hung on and went slowly behind, but I also wanted to support her and be a part of this. But Lisa said, if at this point in my life, God doesn't want me to be a parent to my own child,
biological child.
Yes. Maybe he wants me to be a parent to somebody else's child. And so we kind of went through this training for about 6 months and went through the foster system. And for like 3 or 4 months, nobody called us. We're like, do they think we're not good parents? Like, what's going on here? Do they think we're trying to do this because of Savea? Like seriously, like we were insecure about it. And so we're like, maybe we're not going to be foster parents. We've gone through this training. We wasted a bunch of time, but and I have a friend who is kind of in with the foster system, and she called me and said, hey, I know of this baby. I think this would be a good fit for you. And so that she connected us with these people. We reached out to the caseworkers after that and said, hey, we have this baby right now. And we just kind of interesting situation. And they said, oh yeah, you can have this little boy. And so we had this boy. We got him at about 2.5 months. He's now almost 2.5 years old. He's been with us ever since. But again, there's the fear of, okay, when's he gonna leave? When's he gonna move on? He had a dad who was pretty interested in him early on. And then basically the dad has said, hey, at this point, I want you guys to be the parents, and mom's no longer in the picture anymore. And so we are going to go through the guardianship process. And I think like my deep hope one day is that there's a chance for adoption, because I want his identity to ultimately be found in Jesus Christ. Sure. But I want him to be a Pettengill, and I don't want him to, So he's a Native American boy from one of the tribes, and so he's living with us, and he's our little brother, and we just love him, and so that's filled a lot of gaps in our family. And my daughter is a lot like my wife. She cares about people, and she's just a quiet nurturer, and that's one of her spiritual gifts, and so she just loves on this little boy and cares about this boy, and it's really been fun for all of my kids to be a part of. We took a trip at one point, and we came back, and the kids were kind of like, when we left, like, okay, we need a little bit of a break from this guy because he's been a lot to handle, but they wanted nothing more than to see him when they got back in town. He's our little brother, or my son. Yeah. And so it's just fun because, we have a father who is our father through no matter what. But like, I think of being a father to a kid, whether he's biological, whether he's a kid that lives, across state and ended up in our laps, like it's been a pretty special experience. We want to serve him as best as we can.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, I mean, you've pretty much checked all the boxes on making this a meaningful conversation, bro. I just think there's just in your transparency and openness, and I think that that truly, when we go through those difficult journeys that we don't ask to take, I mean, that's where a lot of times, we see how strong our faith is, or weak, and oftentimes difficult times cause us to do one of two things: run away from God, in anger or sadness or whatever, or blame, or run towards God. And that doesn't mean that you didn't have weak moments. That doesn't mean that it was easy. You spoke to that. You know, they said it was hard. It was the hardest thing you've ever had to go through. But through it all, you knew that who to run to, and that you did that together. And then you were surrounded with a community of believers that did it with you as well, which is such a beautiful picture of what the kingdom is all about. And so thank you for your witness. Thanks for modeling that. Thanks for being willing to share that. And I have no doubt that this time that we've spent together that has been a blessing to not just me, but to those that have been able to watch or listen as well. We do end our time, Jake, with something we call the final word. I didn't brief you on this.
Okay.
But I just have a feeling that you'll be able to handle this pretty well, just knowing you. But it's just something called the final word. Just kind of 60 to 90 seconds of just encouragement. Maybe it's a scripture. Maybe it's just some sort of final word of challenge or whatever for listeners. Whatever the Lord lays on your heart to just share here as we kind of end our time.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. There's a lot of directions that I think I could go with this based on just kind of our conversation today. I shared a little bit earlier about my life verse, and it was probably about 7 or 8 years ago that God just put that verse in front of me. Whatever you eat, whatever you drink, whatever you do it all for the glory of God. And just kind of reflecting on what I said earlier, like, I think we're put in situations where we're walking through our life, and there are ups and there are downs, and there's points where we're stagnant. There's points where we're just on fire for the Lord, and been there, done that. There's valleys and there's mountaintops and whatever. But I just think, like, God created us to be perfectly and wonderfully made, and embrace every moment that you can. Recognize every moment that you've been given is from Him. It's a gift. We don't know if we have tomorrow. We don't know what's next on our journey. And like, my challenge to myself, first of all, my kids, but to the listeners out there, is like, there's moments where you feel like you can turn God off in your life. But, like, I think we're called I know we're called to serve Him and just give glory to Him in all moments. Yeah. And so that would be maybe my challenge for the audience.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. It's a great final word. Well, again, I appreciate your friendship. Appreciate the time that you're willing to give up here on this afternoon and share with me. And, I know that people are blessed for it. So thanks for your time, bro.
Thank you for what you do here.
Yeah. Thanks for listening to my conversation with Jake Pettengill today. If you enjoyed the episode and found it helpful, I encourage you to share it with others that may find it helpful as well. If you'd like to connect more with Jake, you can find him at SiouxFallsChristian.org and on Facebook. Also, I would really appreciate it if you would take just 30 seconds real quick to rate and/or review the podcast. Not only would that be a tremendous gift to me, but it is also a really easy way for you to help us continue to grow both our audience and our impact. All right, thanks again for joining me today, everybody. We'll see you next time for another episode of the RESGEN Giving Life Podcast. Until then, continue being men whose life in Christ gives life to others.